This episode of Hitched to Homicide contains detailed discussions of extreme violence, sexual assault, torture, and the murders of young women and girls. Viewer and listener discretion is strongly advised. If you or someone you know needs support, the National Sexual Assault Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-656-4673.
Somewhere in a classified evidence archive sits an audio recording. The FBI uses it to train agents. Hardened detectives have walked out of the room while it played. Prosecutors have described it as the single most disturbing piece of evidence they've ever encountered. It is approximately 30 minutes long, and it exists because two men made it deliberately. They wanted a souvenir. In the summer of 1979, along the sun-drenched highways of Southern California, in a gray cargo van, two men did something so methodical, so premeditated, so utterly without remorse, that even the language of evil struggles to hold it. This is not a story about a moment of rage. It is not a story about someone who snapped. This is a story about two men who planned, who practiced, who kept score. This is Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, the Toolbox Killers, Part 1. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there in Tahiti.
Ooh, someplace I've never been but would love to go. Put that on the list.
That's it, exactly. Manava. Or as the Muppets would say, Manavana. Manavana.
And that will be the lightest moment of this podcast today. Right there.
Okay.
Wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so people who are just like you and love true crime can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Yep.
If you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions, and you are in. Go join. Mm-hmm. I like to post photos and other information in there as well. We love them. They are our family. They're the best people you could ever know.
They're the best.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send the redhead, that guy out there, some coffee because he drinks it every single episode.
Used to be redder.
Yeah, until he married me. You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a message. The link to that is now at the bottom of the show notes. It says, send Chris and Rob a message. We would love to hear from you.
Yep.
I put off doing this episode for a very, very, very long time.
Why?
Well, I've had no less than 10 requests to cover it. It's so brutal. But here we are.
Okay.
This episode is not for the faint of heart, and I warn you now, you might have bad dreams like I have had while researching it. This is pure evil, perhaps the worst evil in all of true crime.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So buckle in.
Sure, that Scotty, buckle in.
Buckle in, Scotty.
All right, buddy.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. Wikipedia, Oxygen Channel, All That's Interesting, Sue Coletta, and the Crime Writers Resource, A&E Network. I thought I was going to say just the A Network, but it's the A&E Network.
Right.
Criminal Minds, Biography, Reddit, Facebook, Crime Library, Newsweek, the LA Times, the Sacramento Bee, Oxygen, and Peacock's Toolbox Killer, among others. So many people have covered this case. I really tried to do a very deep dive on this, and it was too deep.
Okay.
It was too deep.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's dive into it and do it.
Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker is born on September 27th, 1940 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to a couple who had decided that they did not want kids. He's an unwanted child. His parents thought he was a mistake. His birth father was a violent man, and his mother was a drinker. His mom gave him up, and he's adopted by several different aunts and uncles. Like, he's passed around. And finally, one aunt and uncle step up to the plate and legally adopt him, George and Thelma Bittaker. That old names are all George and Thelma. That's just George and Thelma. They live down the street. Yeah. It's always those old-fashioned names.
Sounds like a sitcom.
It does. But people who did want a child, George and Thelma do want a child. George Bittaker worked, and Rob will like this, he worked in the aviation industry and aircraft factories, and his job required that the family moved around the United States a whole lot when Lawrence is a little boy, because it's World War II. And they moved from Pittsburgh to Florida to Ohio and finally to California, where they lived when Lawrence hits puberty.
They left Ohio for California?
They left Ohio. I know. What can I say?
Hey, I'm from Ohio, so nobody give me any flack about that.
They can't drive in Ohio. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That's not true. They never adopted or had any other children, just Lawrence. He's an only child. And by all accounts, his parents were like a really loving, sort of stable couple. They didn't divorce while he's a child. There was no physical, psychological, or sexual abuse. And neither of his parents used drugs. His mom drank a little bit of alcohol. But I think his parents did the best they could, considering that they moved around a lot. And Lawrence is going to have some problems. He's acting out. I will say that Lawrence has said that he felt like he was a boarder living in the home of his parents. He never had a birthday party. He never went to a birthday party growing up. He said nobody gave a damn about him. And he was so angry as a child, he had a plan to find his mother and kill her when he was an adult.
Wow.
He's always going to think that if his mother hadn't left him, he would never have become the monster that he's going to turn into. So it's not his fault.
Right.
It's because his birth mother left him. At the age of 12, Lawrence is arrested for shoplifting, and this is going to kick off his many arrests as a kid. Shoplifting, petty theft, this happens all throughout his teenage years. He's later going to say that he was just trying to draw attention to himself because he felt like his parents didn't love him, saying that they were cold and detached. It's all, according to him, attention-seeking behavior. And he's later going to say that stealing gave him a feeling of self-importance. And he's going to feel as if he's misunderstood, mistreated, and falsely accused his whole entire life. Wah.
That's a lot.
But this new criminal career, it gives him a buzz. And Lawrence liked to play with things that were exciting, like fire. Yeah. He's like a pyromaniac. Yeah. He burned down a shed one time when he's a kid, and his adoptive mother, in order to show him the consequences of fire, she pulled down his pants, had him lie face down on the bed, and she burned his body with her cigarette over and over to show him why fire is bad. This is according to Lawrence. Okay, that's Lawrence's account.
All right. I think there's other ways of disciplining.
There certainly are. Now, Lawrence is no dummy. He got good grades, and he has a tested IQ of 138. That's close to genius level. Yeah. In the beginning, he did very well in school, but eventually he hated school. When he's an adolescent, he was upset that the family or his parents, he was upset that they had rabbits, of all things. He was mad that his parents had rabbits. And maybe he felt like they treated the rabbits better than they treated him, but he was so upset that, according to him, he took a pair of pliers and pulled out one of the rabbit's 2 front teeth. Ooh. But that's not all, because when he's in these awkward teenage years, he would wander around the neighborhood at night. He stole an alarm clock and he set it for midnight, and then he would wander around the streets at night. He would break into people's homes, not to steal anything, but to rearrange their belongings and their furniture. He wanted them to know that someone had been in their home. He wanted them to feel uneasy about things. He was really bored in high school, but he did make decent grades. And again, he's socially awkward. He's not a big guy. He didn't have any friends really, but he did have a girlfriend. Her name was Mary. And Mary had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she always wore a cross around her neck.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, he can't get to me.
Good.
But he used to take Mary up to the San Gabriel Mountains. He once made a tape recording of the two of them making out. You know, like how you used to have like little tape recorders, a little cassette tape recorder.
So it's just audio?
Just audio of the two of them making out.
Okay.
And when he said to her, Mary, I love you, she told him, yeah, I like you a lot.
No. Oops.
That wasn't good.
Yeah.
Lawrence's high school career is just about over in 1957. He's 17 years old, but just before graduation, Lawrence drops out. He's going to say he was arrested and sent to a youth camp, but his words and recollection and timeline don't really match up with the records. After he drops out of school, his criminal behavior escalates. In Long Beach, California, he steals a car, is part of a hit and run, and then tries to evade arrest, and he's going to be charged with all three of those things. But he's only 17, so they send him to juvie, the California Youth Authority.
Wait a minute. California, the CYA.
The CYA. Cover your ass.
That's pretty funny.
Some later accounts place him first at CYA in Preston and then at a place called the Tracy Dual Vocational Institution after an escape attempt. But that facility is specific. That transfer needs a better source. That really needs a better source. That was sort of his recollection of what his past was.
All right.
And again, the records of his past don't really jive sometimes with what he says.
Right.
Because that's actually a place for adults. He's in the California Youth Authority between 1957 and 1959, and as soon as Lawrence is out, he's 19, by the way, he discovers that his parents had disowned him and moved away without telling him where they were going.
Wow.
They're in another state after leaving California, and he never sees his parents again. No Thanksgivings or Christmases with the Bittakers.
Man.
And perhaps they were tired of Lawrence's antics, which are only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Much worse.
Okay.
Within days of his parole from the California Youth Authority in August of 1959, Lawrence steals a car and drives it all the way to Louisiana, where he's arrested, and the FBI takes over for transporting a stolen vehicle across state lines. It's a federal offense.
Yeah.
So he hasn't learned a daggone thing in juvie. Also, in August of 1959, he's convicted of interstate motor vehicle theft and sentenced to 18 months in the federal Oklahoma State Reformatory. Now, you might wonder why he's going to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It's because it's a federal crime.
Yeah.
And the feds can send you all kinds of different places. There's even a federal prison here in Lexington, Kentucky. And lots of the Watergate guys were there in the 70s.
I didn't know that.
It's a little bit of a white-collar prison here.
Okay.
Yeah. But he's going to ultimately be transferred to the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri, to serve the remainder of his sentence. This is because of his good behavior. And I have to tell you, I think the only place he acts like a decent human being is in prison. He's released in December of 1960. And again, it doesn't take long for him to be arrested once more for robbery in Los Angeles. In May of 1961, Lawrence is sentenced to 1 to 15 years in the state prison. But while he's there, the psychological assessments of Lawrence paint a pretty consistent picture. He's described as paranoid, manipulative, with a great deal of pent-up hostility, not hospitality, Chris. A great deal of pent-up hostility, poor control of impulse behavior, and, quote, basically borderline psychotic, end quote.
And those were his good points.
Yeah.
No.
He's had no normal environment, and he possesses what is called a polymorphous, perverse personality, which means he's able to commit any crime for his own pleasure. He's a chameleon.
Wow.
Now, despite this mental diagnosis, he's released from prison, and his 1 to 15-year sentence in 1963 is over. But he's picked up 2 months later for a parole violation.
Yes.
Well, it's not just a parole violation. It's also a suspected robbery. Yeah, this is in October of 1964.
Guy's just going off on the deep
He
end.
is.
Wow.
Lawrence is examined further by 2 independent psychiatrists. Both of these doctors classified him as a borderline psychopath, defined as, again, highly manipulative. He's a highly manipulative individual, unable to acknowledge the consequences of his actions. Lawrence explained to one of these psychiatrists that his criminal activities gave him a feeling of self-importance, and he also claimed that the circumstances in which he was raised decreased his ability to resist committing crimes. Again, it's not my fault. It's because my parents didn't love me enough.
Wah.
Lawrence is prescribed. Oh, hang on a second. I do want to say he didn't have the best childhood, but there are a lot of people who don't have a great childhood who are not going to go on to do the things that he's going to do as an adult.
Yeah.
In end quote of Chris.
Yeah.
Lawrence was prescribed antipsychotic medication, and a year later, he is once again released into society.
Jeez.
In July of 1967, Lawrence is arrested and convicted of theft and leaving yet another hit and run. He's sentenced to 5 years, but will be released in April of 1970. He will be picked up in March of 1971 for burglary and parole violations and sentenced to 6 months to 15 years in October of 1971. He will serve 3 years of that sentence and get out on parole once more. They keep letting him out.
Jeez.
Then in 1974, while Lawrence is living in Hollywood, he goes into a Ralph's supermarket and he puts a steak down his pants instead of paying for it.
Is that a steak in your pants? Or
Are you just happy to see me?
Sorry.
So he waltzes into Ralph's and just shoves a New York strip or a porterhouse down his pants.
Good thing it wasn't a tenderloin. Just kidding.
But an employee sees this happen, and they follow him out to the parking lot, and he tries to stop him, and when he's confronted, he pulls a knife on this employee, and he stabbed them in the chest, just barely missing this guy's heart.
Wow.
The person would survive, but the supermarket workers, they watch it go down, and they jump on Lawrence, and they stop him from getting away. And Lawrence was arrested for assault with an attempt to commit murder. He's convicted of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon and sent to California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo.
And where's that exactly? Never heard of it.
St. Louis Obispo.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, meet Roy Lewis Norris. Roy is born on February 5th, 1948 in Greenlee, Colorado. There's no record of what his parents' names were. Maybe they've tried to keep that out of everything.
I would.
He was conceived out of wedlock, and because it's 1948, his parents decide they better get married in order to avoid the stigma of getting pregnant.
Right.
They had extended family that lived nearby. His grandfather owned some land that they were around a lot, but his father worked at a scrapyard, and his mother was a housewife who struggled with drugs. And he does have a sister, a biological sister. So this is a dysfunctional household, and because his parents couldn't care for him, he spent time in and out of foster homes in Colorado. And later he's going to say that he was underfed and poorly clothed while in foster care. So his parents don't really want him, and the foster families are treating him badly. Roy will also claim that he was sexually abused when he was in the care of a Hispanic foster family. And because of this, he's going to have a prejudice against Hispanic people for the rest of his life. At the age of 16, while Roy is living with his birth parents, he visited the home of a female relative who was in her early 20s. And while visiting with this woman, he began speaking to her in a sexually suggestive manner. And I don't know if it was like, hey, baby, hey, baby. But she's not happy.
Yeah.
And she kicks him out. But she tells Roy's father. And Roy's dad threatened to beat Roy. So Roy stole his father's car and he drove it into the Rocky Mountains. He's running away rather than getting beaten by his dad. And when he gets there, he decides he's going to end his life instead of facing his father's fists. He's going to inject air into his bloodstream, causing a fatal air embolism, which he tried, but he didn't succeed. He's found by the authorities. They classify him as a runaway, and they take him right back to his parents. Now, how he had access to a hypodermic needle is beyond me.
Yeah.
Perhaps somebody in the family was diabetic. Who knows? But he is unsuccessful.
Gotcha.
So the police take Roy back to his house, and Roy's parents tell Roy and his younger sister that they were really both unwanted and that they intended to divorce when the both of them reached adolescence. So it's like, not only did we not want to be with each other, we don't want to be with you either. Not very nice, right?
Yeah.
A year later, when he's 17, Roy enters the U.S. Navy. It's 1965. He's going to spend most of his time stateside in San Diego with a very short non-combat tour in Vietnam. But during his Vietnam deployment, he starts to use drugs, and in particular, weed. And when he comes back to San Diego, he will begin to spiral. In 1968, he commits some serious sexual offenses against women while he's technically still part of the Navy. He's still on duty. He climbed into a woman's car uninvited and tried to rape her. The police intervened before he could do it. And after this, the military psychologist evaluates Roy, and he is diagnosed with severe schizoid personality disorder, saying he had severe psychological problems. And buddy, did they just say a mouthful. Now, the Navy gives him an administrative discharge on the grounds of psychological problems. They feed him directly into the civilian, criminal, and psychiatric systems for years. It's just sort of like, we don't want him. Yeah. We're handing him off to you guys, okay?
Clap their hands. We're out.
Yes. In May of 1970, while Roy is out on bail in San Diego for his attempted rape, he begins stalking a female student on the San Diego State campus. He attacks her from behind, hits her in the back of the head with a rock, and as she went down, he repeatedly slammed her head into the concrete sidewalk while he's kneeling on her lower back. He's got a knee in her back.
Good Lord.
Roy is charged with assault with a deadly weapon. He had intentions of raping her, but since it didn't get that far, it's only assault. I say that, only assault.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
After this, instead of a conventional prison, he's committed to Atascadero State Hospital for up to 5 years, where he's classified as a mentally disordered sex offender.
Okay.
He will be released from prison in 1975 and go on probation when the psychiatrist decided that he was no longer a danger to himself or others, which is certainly not true.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, while Roy is coming into Atascadero State Hospital on December 18th, 1969, Ed Kemper was released on parole from there on his 21st birthday. And Ed Kemper will go on to commit 8 more very gruesome murders. This is after he murdered his grandparents when he's only 15 and why he's in this hospital.
Man.
Arthur Lee Allen, a suspect in the Zodiac killer case, was also at Atascadero State Hospital. It's just a who's who of killers at this place, right?
Yeah.
Roy is released 5 years later in 1975 and given an additional 5 years probation. The doctors say he's no longer a danger to himself or others, something we've heard before. Then just 3 months later, Roy approached a woman in Redondo Beach. We don't know her name. What we do know is that she's 27 years old and she's walking home from a restaurant. Roy offers her a ride on his motorcycle, and when she said no, he pulled over, parked his motorcycle, grabbed the scarf she was wearing, twisted it around her neck, and tells her, "I'm going to rape you."
Oh, jeez.
He dragged her into some nearby bushes, and she was so frightened, she thinks if she cooperates with him, he's going to spare her life. So she doesn't resist, and he does rape her. She reported the rape, but police initially couldn't identify him as the attacker. About a month later, she sees the same motorcycle that Roy was riding the night he raped her, and she writes down the license plate, and she turns it in, which allows the police to link him to the assault, and this led to his arrest and another 5-year prison sentence at the California Men's Colony in St. Louis Obispo.
Okay.
And who is already serving time at the California Men's Colony for deadly assault with a deadly weapon after shoving a steak down his drawers? Lawrence Bittaker.
Yeah.
Worlds are about to collide. So a diagnosed severe schizoid personality befriends a diagnosed borderline psychopath. Satan meet the devil, right?
What could possibly go wrong?
They are both criminally insane, and they are going to become each other's hype man, best friend, and some people even called them soulmates.
Jeez.
Lawrence Bittaker notices that when Roy comes into prison, he aligns himself with the hardened criminals from the motorcycle gangs, and he starts dealing in contraband, mostly drugs. And Lawrence, who's super smart and manipulative, is impressed by Roy's business savvy. He's impressed by the way he conducts his business with all this contraband. And Roy thought Lawrence was smart. And these two are a little bit like Mutt and Jeff, because Lawrence isn't a big guy, but he's got a big brain. And Roy isn't all that smart, but he's a big guy. He's tall and he's over 200 pounds. One's the brain and the other is the muscle.
Right.
They gradually become more acquainted as Roy started to teach Lawrence how to make jewelry.
Okay, well, that's random.
They're making jewelry in prison.
Wow.
And apparently this is a common prison side hustle. So they would sit together and they would make jewelry and chat. It's like a stitching bitch for women. But they're making jewelry, rings, bracelets, and pendants. They use scrap plastic, metal, and thread, and the jewelry was sold or traded inside the prison economy, which is something that is so interesting to me because it's kind of like a barter system. If you don't have money on your commissary card or whatever, you have to find other ways to get what you want or what you need.
Right.
And as these two become closer, Lawrence even saved Roy from being attacked by other inmates at least 2 different times. And under the prison code, Roy was, or at least he felt, obligated to Lawrence after this.
Okay.
And maybe these two who have felt so neglected all their lives, both of them, they finally have someone who has their back. So this is the first time either one of them really has somebody, I guess, who's willing to come to their defense or their aid, right?
Right.
So what does a man with a severe schizoid personality and a psychopath talk about to pass the time in prison? Well, by 1978, these two, who were daily companions, talked openly about sexual violence and misogyny. And the more they talked, the more they realized that they shared a deep attraction to the idea of dominating and hurting young women.
Did we just become best friends?
Yes.
Jeez.
In fact, Lawrence wants to become, quote, bigger than Charles Manson.
Oh, man.
Roy told Lawrence that his biggest sexual turn-on came from seeing, quote, frightened young women, end quote, and that this was why his record was filled with sexual offenses, which is a little bit of big talk from Roy. I think he wants Lawrence to understand why he raped 3 women, but he assaulted 3 women. He was going to rape them,
Right.
but he raped one of them only because he was caught. before he could rape her. But he's definitely a serial rapist.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And while Lawrence didn't make people feel uncomfortable around him, he's a quiet psychopath. Lawrence is a quiet psychopath. Roy did give people the creepy crawlies. He's not smart enough to hide his crazy. And Lawrence, who had no documented sex crimes before meeting Roy, said that if he ever raped a woman, he would kill her because he needed to eliminate the witness. Now, in private, these two are making jewelry, pumping each other up, and having very specific conversations, turning it all into a project they designed, which was to kidnap, rape, torture, and murder teenage girls once they were released, aiming at least in their fantasy to have one victim each from the age of 13 to 19. They wanted one in all the teens.
Jeez.
And they wanted to record the acts on tape and film. These two discussed the logistics in detail, where they would hunt, how they would avoid detection, what tools they would use, and what kind of vehicle would be best to carry out their plans. And a guy who would listen to these two was another convicted killer. His name was Richard Shupman. He was at the same prison with Roy and Lawrence for killing a college girl. And this guy, who is not a writer, would listen to these murder fantasies, and he would write them up and sell them to the other prisoners.
Good Lord. Ugh.
Yeah, things like who they wanted to hunt, who they wanted to rape and kill, and how they wanted to set up an underground torture chamber and holding cells for the kidnapped girls.
Wow.
He wrote about Lawrence and Roy fantasizing about cabins, trailers, caves, and kidnapping the girls by their teenage age. Most think he did this for the prison economy and for the audience, this Shupman guy.
Right.
These twisted stories had market value inside the prison system, so it was something he could bargain with for commissary items or favors. Again, this fascinates me. It really fascinates me.
Right.
It's handmade violent pornography / terror fiction based on Roy and Lawrence's wild fantasies.
Man.
But one of them is going to parole out of prison before the other, and these two promise to reconnect on the other side. On October 15th, 1978, Lawrence Bittaker was released from the California men's colony at St. Louis Obispo. He moved to Los Angeles and worked as a skilled machinist, making close to $1,000 a week.
Whoa.
Which in today's money, he's earning over $5,000 a week, $20,000 a month.
Jeez. What? He was a machinist?
A machinist.
Man.
He rents a room at the Scott Motel in Burbank, and he lives a low-profile, transient style of life that made it easy for him to move around Southern California without anybody really noticing him. He liked the Scott Motel because it was filled with a younger crowd, and he always had money, and he always had weed, and because of this, all these younger kids who were living there, they liked Lawrence. And remember, he can hide his crazy.
Right.
And he liked it that they liked him. The teenagers he's around like him because he always had beer and weed at his place, and he would give it out. And this Scott Motel is a place where Los Angeles teens would gather and socialize. So they're not necessarily living there. They're just getting a room and partying.
Okay.
And there's Lawrence right next door. Now, despite his long criminal record, Lawrence cultivated a persona as a quiet, generous loner in this neighborhood. He befriended the locals and was thought of as helpful. He occasionally made conspicuous charitable gestures, like buying large quantities of fast food and wine and handing it out to the homeless people in downtown L.A. He was also known to donate money to the Salvation Army. Now, Lawrence, were you going to say something?
Well, it's just, there's no
such
rhyme.
Such a contradiction.
There's just no rhyme or reason to this guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lawrence is also writing to Roy in prison, his soulmate. He's keeping the connection alive between the two of them.
Right.
And in their letters, they would continue discussing their shared fantasy of abducting and torturing teenage girls once they were both free and back together again. On January 15th, 1979, 3 months after Lawrence is released from prison, Roy Norris was also released from the California men's colony.
That's not good.
He moved to a trailer park in Redondo Beach to live with his mother. He used his Navy background to get a job as an electrician, including jobs in and around Compton, California. And it's not long after this that Roy writes to Lawrence so they can get together. Hey, dude, I'm out living with my mom. When can I see you? Kind of thing. In late February 1979, Lawrence is living in Burbank and Roy in Redondo Beach. They're roughly 26 miles apart. They meet up in a hotel in L.A., and they rekindle their plan to kidnap and rape girls.
Man.
And what I found interesting is that according to the 2021 Oxygen special, The Toolbox Killers, Lawrence wants Roy to quit his job so they can build a compound and he can take care of Roy financially. Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah. So, I mean, is he gay? I mean...
No, they're not gay.
Okay.
They're not gay.
All right.
But apparently, according to FBI agents who know this case well, Lawrence is very much in charge, and they call it a student-teacher scenario. He wants to show Roy. He wants to be in charge.
Okay.
But Roy keeps his job as an electrician. Also at this meeting, Lawrence and Roy decide that in order to successfully carry out their plan, they would need not a car, but a van.
Of course.
So that's what they buy in February of 1979. Lawrence, with Roy's financial help, they purchase what all nightmares are made of, a silver 1977 GMC Vandura cargo van. No windows, with a passenger side closing sliding door.
Yeah.
Nightmares.
Yep.
And according to Lawrence, he liked the sliding door because that meant Roy could pull up really close to a teenage girl and not even have to open the door all the way before snatching her inside.
Man.
And they named the van. Have you ever named a car?
You know, I've never done that.
I named 2.
Yeah.
I had a 1974 or 76, I can't remember, bright orange Chevy Vega. That was my very first car. It had no air conditioning and no power steering. And everybody called it OJ.
Yeah.
And I also had a Prelude my senior year in college and then right out of college. And everybody called that the Lude.
The Lude.
It was the 80s. Sorry. It was the late 80s.
Yeah. My car that I drove in high school was our secondary car. And it did have a name, but it was called POS.
I had a friend who drove the big bad Plymouth Valiant.
Nice.
It was the biggest car ever. I think we could fit 10 people, and that was just in the back seat.
Yeah. It had ropes to dock with. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those cars were huge back then. They were so big. I never drove a big one, but yeah, they were big.
Yep.
But Lawrence and Roy, they named their van Murder Mac.
Ugh.
Roy said it was a Mack truck. So that's how they came up with the name Murder Mac.
Wow. Clever.
So clever. Then they began doing what they called dry runs or practice runs. From February to June of 1979, Lawrence and Roy picked up over 20 female hitchhikers on the PCH, on the Pacific Coast Highway.
Right.
None of them were harmed. They were only test runs to refine their ruse. But they were doing more than just this in the dry runs. They were also looking for secluded sites to carry out their plan. And Lawrence, who used to take Mary, his girlfriend, who has blonde hair and blue eyes, and used to wear a cross around her neck, Lawrence knows these San Gabriel mountain areas really well because he used to take Mary up there.
Right.
And he says you could scream up there and no one would hear a thing.
Wow.
In April, They found an isolated fire road in the San Gabriel Mountains, the Upper Monroe Truck Trail, and Lawrence broke the gate lock with a crowbar and replaced it with his own lock. I also read that they just left it unlocked.
Okay.
But this would give them access to this road, and now they have their own private killing site. And while they're there, Lawrence snaps a photo of Roy pointing to this lock or the lack of thereof, and they send this photo to Richard Shupman, the guy who's writing about all this fun stuff about them in prison.
Right.
And they tell him, we're going through with our plan.
Man.
Near the end of June, Lawrence and Roy decide they're ready to put their plan into action. Dress rehearsal is over. They've constructed a bed in the rear of the van, a plywood bed platform. Then they stored tools, clothes, and a drink cooler for beer and soft drinks. And next to the cooler, they kept a metal toolbox containing key, torture, and control items.
Wow.
Pliers, ice picks, a sledgehammer, and a sap. Do you know what a sap is?
I don't.
It's when you put weighted things, BBs, weights inside a bag, and then you swing it and hit somebody with it.
Wow.
They are, over the course of time, going to add to this van a bag of lead weights for this sap. It's meant to be swung, just like I said, or slapped against someone.
Right.
A jar of Vaseline, a book on radio frequencies, a police radio, among other things.
Yeah.
They keep adding things to this van.
Yeah.
On June 24th, 1979, as described in Lawrence's own written accounts of the events of this day, Lawrence says that he and Roy first finished constructing a bed in the rear of the van. They placed tools, clothes, and a cooler filled with beer and soft drinks under the bed, and they drove around for the next 15 hours smoking weed and photographing girls. So they've been photographing girls along all these dry runs. They're picking girls up,
Right.
but they're also just photographing them, like along the beach.
Okay.
At around 7:30, 8 p.m. on June 24th, 1979, in Redondo Beach, Cindy Schaefer, who is 16 years old, was walking to her grandmother's house. Lucinda Lynn Schaefer, who went by Cindy, arrived in Los Angeles just 19 days before, on the 5th of June. She's staying with her grandparents in their Torrance home. She was born in Bexar County, Texas, on July 9th, 1962. She has an older brother. Cindy's parents divorced in 1971. She rarely saw her father, who lived in Texas, and her mother, who was a Montessori school teacher, was conducting a summer seminar for other teachers in Mexico City. Cindy lived with her mother in Wisconsin, but she and her mom had actually lived in Mexico for a while. She just finished her junior year of high school in Wisconsin, and she was planning on spending her summer working and enjoying the beach. She took a job working for a Torrance pediatrician's office, Dr. Rafael Solis. He was Argentinian, and more than half of his patients were Spanish-speaking. And because Cindy had lived in Mexico, she spoke fluent Spanish, as did her mother.
Right.
She's really smart. She was also a Spanish, algebra, and geometry tutor at her school. And she fit right into California with her blonde hair and her blue eyes. And while in California for the summer, she worked for this doctor from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. on each weekday. Now, Cindy loved playing the guitar, and she was actually taking lessons. And on June 23rd, Cindy wrote a letter to her best friends, quote, "By the time I get my next paycheck, in about 1.5 weeks, I will have almost $600 in the bank. Not bad for something I enjoy so much, playing with the kids and kidding around with the doctor and the 2 other ladies that work there. I really love it. I'm really going to miss them when I have to leave here." End quote. She wrote about her boyfriend in Wisconsin who called her every 3 days. You got to remember, he's only calling her every 3 days, but it's long distance.
Yeah, exactly. That was costing him his entire earnings for a week.
It was a big deal to call long distance.
Yeah, it sure was.
And she would talk to her friend in San Jose who was coming down in 2 weeks to help her celebrate her 17th birthday. And she wrote if things worked out, she would be going to Mexico City in August to see all of her friends there. Quote, I miss you so much and everything else about Wisconsin. I cry a lot because I get to feeling pretty lonely sometimes. I just tell myself there's no use in feeling sad because there's nothing I can do about it. I just try to feel glad about the good friends I've made and look to the future when I'll make some more, end quote. She wrote about moving to Oregon, where her mother would be teaching, and about going to the beach and the library and playing her guitar. Quote, but I'm always alone. I've been asked on a few dates, but I have declined, end quote. But she didn't mention in the letters she wrote that day that she was going to a church fellowship meeting in the evening, a promise she had made to her grandmother so she could meet, quote, clean-cut people her own age, end quote. Grandma's looking out for her.
Yeah.
Cindy walked most places, but on the 24th of June, her grandmother drove her to St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Redondo Beach. She was dropped off at 7:25 p.m. at D Avenue and Pacific Coast Highway for a weekly teen meeting, which she had only ever attended once before. And as Cindy steps out of her grandmother's car, she reminded her that the mother of one of the girls was going to bring her home. And she says, see you later, Grandma. She waves at her. Her grandmother is like waving back at her, and she pulls the car away from the curb. That's the last time they will see Cindy. Her family will see her.
Yeah, that's
Cindy goes inside the church, but she didn't stay long enough for the 7:30 p.m. meeting to begin. So her grandmother drops her off at 7:25, and apparently she just kind of walked in and walked out. She listened as the rest of the teenagers, most of whom she didn't really know, they were chatting, and then suddenly she just turned and walked out the door. And one of the girls at the meeting asks her, like, where are you going? And the girl thought maybe Cindy had been neglected. And she tells her, look, the meeting's just going to start. And Cindy says, I know, but I've got to get home. And Cindy smiled and walked out the door. Meanwhile, Lawrence and Roy have been driving around again for 15 hours, smoking weed and photographing unsuspecting girls. And then they spotted Cindy walking home. Lawrence and Roy pulled up next to her in the murder Mac and tried to entice her to let them give her a lift. She is not hitchhiking. She's just walking.
Right.
They offered her weed and a ride, and she said no thank you and kept walking. Roy and Lawrence watched Cindy as she stops to pet a kitten on the sidewalk. She bent down to pick up this kitten, and she played with it a little bit, enough that the kitten started to follow her home. And she told the kitten no, and she tossed like a pebble towards the house where the kitten was playing in the yard. And the kitten chased after it, and Cindy walked ahead. But just those few moments gave Roy and Lawrence time to make a plan. They drove the van ahead of Cindy and parked on the side of the road. And they're on the side of the road where she's walking. Before they were on the opposite side, apparently. But they do a U-turn, and now they're on the same side of the road she's walking. And they position the van in front of someone's driveway. And they acted like they were fixing something on the van. And she's apparently not afraid of the two of them because she didn't cross the street to steer clear of them. You know how sometimes in a big city, like when I'm in New York, if I see a man who's taken off all his clothes, which this has actually happened before, who's like a homeless man who's taken off all his clothes and he's walking toward me, I jaywalk and I'm on the other side of the street all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, right.
She does not cross the street. And as she walked past the van, Roy turned around, ran up behind her and put his hand over her mouth and swung her into the van. She lost a shoe as she was being dragged off the street. Cindy did scream, but Lawrence turned up the radio super loud to drown out her screams. And then they gagged her and bound her with duct tape.
Jeez.
They took her to their pre-selected spot in the San Gabriel Mountains. And at first, according to Lawrence, Cindy fought them, so much so that Lawrence will have a scar on his chest from where she scratched him. She's fighting for her life.
Wow.
But then Cindy became very calm and accepting of the situation she was in. They took her to the fire road, and for hours, they raped and tortured her, both of them.
Jeez.
They took turns standing outside the van while the other was inside with Cindy. And Cindy asked them if they were going to kill her. She told them if they were going to kill her, she wanted to pray, to which Lawrence says to her, no, saying, quote, God isn't here, only devils, end quote.
Well, he's right about that.
And if that doesn't send a shiver down your spine, I don't know what will.
Man.
It's believed that these two argued, Roy and Lawrence, about whether or not to kill Cindy. Roy wondered if he had to kill her or if they could just let her go. But Lawrence tells him she's been with us for a couple of hours and she can ID both of us. And Lawrence tells Roy that he will hold her and Roy can strangle her. But Roy couldn't do it. He apparently tried to strangle Cindy first, but as he did, he became physically ill. When he saw this certain look in Cindy's eye, he got out of the van, circled around, and threw up in front of the van.
Yeah.
But when this happened, Lawrence decided to take matters into his own hands. He strangled Cindy to death with a wire coat hanger, twisting it with pliers to tighten it.
Ugh.
Then they wrapped her lifeless body in a plastic shower curtain, and they threw it over a steep canyon edge in the San Gabriel Mountains. Lawrence wanted the wildlife to consume Cindy's remains. Her body has never been found, and her family will never get to bury her.
Wow.
She was 2 weeks away from her 17th birthday, and she had plans to go to college someday and teach a foreign language just like her mother. Now, after this, Lawrence has said that he didn't feel anything. He saw articles in the local newspapers about Cindy's disappearance, but none of it fazed him. Lawrence was a criminal sexual sadist. He was sexually aroused by the physical or emotional pain he would inflict on a non-consenting partner. He wants to hear their screams. He wants them to fight. He wants them to cry. He wants to see their fear. And according to the FBI, this is something that would have started at an early age.
Wow.
10 days later, Roy and Lawrence have spotted another victim. And it's important to say that at the time in California, the beach towns in South Bay were considered safe. The area was close to LAX, the airport, so lots of pilots and flight attendants would hang out there. There were lots of girls in bikinis. They were on roller skates. There were guys working out, bodybuilders. The Strand was where the action was, and the Strand is the paved oceanfront path that runs along the beaches of Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, and Redondo Beach. And people used it for walking and biking and jogging and to get to and from the piers and the different beach neighborhoods. So there are oceanfront homes, there's sand, there's surfers, runners, beach cruisers, volleyball courts, there's bars. It's a very specific Southern California setting, and it was where Lawrence and Roy went to find their victims. And lots of these girls are hitchhiking. It's just a way of life.
Right.
I have never hitchhiked in my life. Please don't anybody hitchhike out there ever. I think most people know now that it's just not safe.
Yep.
It was a different time back then, but by the end of the late 70s, I would have thought that the hitchhiking craze was kind of over because the 70s saw its own fair share of serial killers. So, but there were still people in California hitchhiking.
Man.
It's July 8th, 1979, and 18-year-old Andrea Joy Hall is hitchhiking on the Pacific Coast Highway near Manhattan Beach. She's on her way to Wilmington, which is about 14 miles away, to visit her boyfriend. She's wearing her bathing suit, a burgundy-colored one-piece, and a pair of blue terry cloth shorts. She has blonde hair and blue eyes. She's a very pretty girl. Andrea was born on October 21st, 1960, in Cleveland, Ohio, to Lloyd and Patricia Hall. She grew up in Akron, Ohio, and moved to Los Angeles, California, in February of 1978. She regularly sent letters home. She had no job at the time of her disappearance, and her only steady source of income came from donating blood.
Oh, jeez. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She only had a savings account containing just a few dollars. And on that day, she had been to the beach with her sister and her nieces and nephews. So she's from Akron. Her family's there, parents are there, but apparently she has a sister there in Southern California. And that's who she's been to the beach with.
All right.
And Lawrence and Roy are watching her. But another driver stopped to pick her up. She's out hitchhiking. They're watching. They're going to get her. but a car in front of them stops and picks her up first.
Well, it sounds like she almost got lucky.
Almost.
Yeah.
But they follow this car that's picked her up
Right.
until it dropped her off near Redondo Beach.
Okay.
Which means she still has about another 11 miles to get to Wilmington. I should also say that in one source it said that the boyfriend lived in Torrance, which is like 7 miles from Wilmington.
Okay.
But Andrea starts hitchhiking again, and Lawrence pulled up and over and offered her a ride in the van. And Lawrence wanted Andrea to believe that he was alone in this van. So he had Roy hide under the bedspread in the back of the van. And when she's inside, Lawrence offered her a cold drink from the cooler. Hey, it's hot out there. Why don't you get yourself something cold to drink? And when she moved toward the back of the van to open the cooler, Roy burst out from hiding, grabbed her, and twisted her arm behind her back to the point that she screamed. And Andrea was loud, and they were in the middle of traffic.
Oh, wow.
And Roy couldn't get a handle on Andrea. So Lawrence again turns up the radio in the van. He blasts it so it's louder than her screams. And she's fighting and punching Roy. So Lawrence slams on the brakes and they both go tumbling forward. And this is when Roy finally gets a handle on Andrea. He restrains and gags her using duct tape. Lawrence kept driving while Roy tied her wrists and ankles, and they headed up to their remote fire road in the San Gabriel Mountains above Glendora, pretty much the same area where they had taken Cindy, their first victim.
Right.
At the first mountain location, both Roy and Lawrence raped Andrea repeatedly in the van over a period of hours. They also forced her to pose for Polaroid photographs, some of which were in the nude. They wanted these photographs for masturbation. And these two demons would even exchange these Polaroids like baseball cards. Like Roy would come to Lawrence's place and exchange the photos for something that he had that he wanted.
Wow.
At one point, they drove away briefly, leaving her hidden in the back of the van, then returned and moved to a second spot that was deeper in the mountains. Lawrence forced Andrea out of the van naked and made her walk up a hill beside the roadway, then forced her to perform oral sex on him and took more Polaroids. Roy will later say that when he saw the photos, Andrea's face showed, quote, sheer terror, end quote. Lawrence took the camera and said to Andrea, quote, I'm going to kill you, end quote, and immediately takes a photo of her because he wants that initial shock of terror on her face.
Yeah.
That's what turns him on.
Sick.
They go on to a third location, and again, Lawrence led Andrea away from the van and into the hills and told Roy to drive to a liquor store. He wants to be alone with her. But these two are staying in contact because they have walkie-talkies. But while Roy is away, Lawrence takes more photographs of Andrea. He asked her to give him as many reasons as she could think of as to why they should not kill her.
Man.
And not liking her answers, he plunged an ice pick through each ear into her brain and stomped on the handle till it broke. He was hoping that the ice pick would kill her, but it didn't. He had actually seen this in a movie, thinking that it was going to kill her. So he manually strangled her, then threw her off a cliff in the San Gabriel Mountains. Andrea's body will never be found.
Jeez.
When Roy pulled in, Lawrence was sitting there waiting for him, calm, quiet, the way only a man completely unbothered by what he had just done could be calm and quiet. Andrea Joy Hall was gone. Lawrence holds up these Polaroids he's taken, and in them, Andrea looks terrified because she was.
Yeah.
Because she knew. He told Roy what he'd done. Matter of fact, like a man reporting on the weather. I killed her.
Jeez.
And Roy Norris, convicted rapist, a man who knew exactly what Lawrence Bittaker was capable of, says nothing. And the two of them got back in the van and just drove.
Man.
Now, here's what should chill you to your core.
Okay.
These two had only been at it for a few weeks, Andrea was the second. Before her was Cindy Schaefer. And after Andrea, there's going to be more. Lawrence and Roy are not finished, not even close. They had a list, a deliberate, methodical list, one victim for every teenage year, 13 through 19. They called it a goal. They called it a plan, and they were only getting started. 2 girls are already gone. 5 more ages remained unchecked. And somewhere out there right now in the summer of 1979, 2 young women named Leah and Jackie have no idea that a gray cargo van is already moving through Southern California traffic. They have no idea who Lawrence Bittaker is. They have no idea what's coming.
Man.
Next week, we will continue the horrible story of the Toolbox Killers, their takedown, and the trial. But for now, that's all I have to say about that.
All right, my take on this whole thing is that I don't have a take on it, because if you look in the dictionary under evil, you're probably going to see these 2 guys.
Yeah, absolutely. They're the worst. That's why I said I've put off doing this case.
Yeah.
I really have. But then when so many people kept asking for it, that's when I did a deep dive, and I was really sad that I did a deep dive.
Man.
But we got part 2 next week.
I can't wait.
I'm sure.
Well, let's get away from that and do a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number 1.
Number 1.
Will the real Ed Sheeran please stand up?
I love Ed Sheeran.
Yeah. The Fugitive Task Force is looking for Ronnie Williams Jr. of Cincinnati for fraud. He has convinced 3 local churches that he is Ed Sheeran, and even went as far as performing The Shape of You in front of Christ Community Church last Sunday.
He did not.
He did. When Pastor was asked why he believed the real Ed Sheeran would perform for, get this, $35 and a sandwich, he said he just assumed that he had fallen on tough times.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you have any information as to Ronnie's whereabouts, please message the Cincinnati PD immediately.
Do you think he was speaking with a British accent? I mean...
Well, I've seen a picture of him, and he doesn't look like Ed Sheeran. He's got a little bit of red hair, but that's it.
Oh, he does not look like Ed Sheeran.
Oh, no way. Not even close.
So obviously there were no youngsters in this congregation.
Who knows? All right, number 2.
Number 2.
It's not my fault.
Okay.
A Florida man accused of shoplifting more than $4,000 worth of merchandise from Walmart blamed it on something strange.
Okay.
He claims that his diabetes is at fault and that his blood sugar causes him to, quote, not always know what he is doing, unquote. Mm-hmm. The man was busted twice at the same Walmart 2 different times after attempting to steal over $2,000 of merchandise.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. After the arrest, they discovered that there were 2 other previous attempts at shoplifting another $2,000 worth of merchandise. You know, if you're doing $2,000 worth of merchandise at Walmart, that's a lot of merchandise.
That's a lot. And usually if your blood sugar is low, you don't feel like shopping.
Yeah. All right. Diabetes or not, this man is not good at shoplifting.
He is not. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
He's like a Medea. I'm a diabetical. I got to eat on the regular.
There you go. The man was arrested and is being held by Florida authorities. All right. Number 3. And finally. This will raise your spirits.
Oh, good.
The censer burner. Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, censer burners in the Catholic Church when they're doing the incense and they got the little thing they swing back.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's called a censer burner. Is used in the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela to celebrate the Epiphany of the Lord, known worldwide.
Okay.
Several assistants stated that in the occasion of the Holy Precinct was suddenly covered in an odd smell. Quote, it did not smell as always. It was a familiar smell, but I couldn't relate it to anything. But in my son's bedroom sometimes it smells like that, unquote. Following the mass, these altar boys were arrested by the police after confirming that the strange smell was correspond to marijuana.
They just had a little bit of weed in that incense thing,
Quote,
swinging it around the church.
Quote, it was a joke. The idea came during Christmas Eve Mass. We bought no more than a half kilo of weed.
That's a lot of weed.
It is, and we dropped it inside the censer burner. We are sure that people has left of the cathedral happier more than ever. Unquote.
Yeah. Father, they're putting more in the collection plate. They got more out of. They had like an epiphany listening to your homily.
Yeah. Quote, finally they were freed without charge, but they will not be able to discharge their function as altar boys anymore. Unquote.
Just out there doing the Lord's work.
That's it. They should bless your hearts. Yeah.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case, like a ton of you all suggested this one, or tell us about your brush with true crime. Mm-hmm. That's my amazing husband out there.
That's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.